Up to this point so far in economics, we have looked at what is economics. We've looked at different type of economic systems, and then we looked in the last chapter about the American free enterprise system. We are now moving away into a different unit, Unit 2, and it's really examining how the market works in microeconomics. So in Chapter 4, we will be studying something called demand. How do we decide on what to buy? So in Section 1, we are going to answer the question, how does the law of demand affect the quantity demanded? In this section, we will get a good understanding of what demand is. This is really one of the fundamentals to understanding economics altogether, is figuring out what demand is all about. In Chapter 5, we'll talk about supply, and in Chapter 6, we will then talk about how the relationship between demand and supply work together. So let's start focusing on right now is Chapter 4, demand. How does the law of demand affect the quantity demand? Well, let's look at what is demand. This is a desire to own something and the ability to pay for it. And it has to have both of those parts in order to be considered demand. Now, if there's no desire for it, it kind of takes away the whole motive to purchase it. And the ability to pay for it, if you can't afford it, or if you cannot buy it, have no means to do it, it's not a demand, it's just more of a dream of something to own. Now, the law of demand, which has been called the most famous law in economics and one that economists are most sure of, is the law of demand. On this law is built almost the whole edifice of economics. That's a quote from one of the senior economics or President Council of Economic Advisors. He's stating that the law of demand is fundamental, and also it's one of the pillars that holds economics together. Consumers will buy more of a good when its price is lower and less when the price is higher. And it's common sense, but there's a law behind it known as the law of demand. So when prices are higher, when prices are lower, people will buy more of something, or they will be more motivated to buy something when it comes to this. Now, when prices increase, then people don't buy as much because one, they don't have the same amount of resources, and second, they're looking for something else, or maybe they can only afford a limited amount when it comes to that. So law of demand is one of the fundamental parts of economics that everyone should know. Now we have another term called substitute effect. And what this means is when a price reaches a point where in our minds it becomes too expensive, we make the decision that we are going to look for something else. So if you have your favorite place you like to go out to eat, and then all of a sudden the price doubles, well, then you are going to look for a substitute because it's way too expensive for you to go there. So this is what something that especially businesses have to focus on is a substitute effect. What is the maximum price I could put an item? That is, I'm not going to lose my customers when it comes to this, but I don't want to do it too low where I'm not making enough profit. So the substitute effect again says if price increases, this means the consumers will buy less of this or look for something else when it comes to this, when it comes to an item. And it's different for everybody because we all have different preferences on what we like to have and not like to have. Another thing that affects demand is the income effect. And this is the change in consumption that results when a price increases cause a real income to decline. So example, if your dad comes home tonight or your mom comes home tonight and says that they've lost their job or quit their job or whatever it might be, now that's going to be a great impact on your family for income wise. And now you won't have a choice when it comes to this. You will have to buy certain products that are cheaper as a result of this income effect. So if inflation goes too high in the United States and raises can't keep up with them, that is an income effect because people don't have as much money as they used to have. If they cut back on your hours for your part-time job, that's an income effect. This is where your income is declined. Now, we all have in our mind, if we were to take a survey at the beginning of class and ask how much would you be willing to buy a pair of shoes, um, we would be able to create, you would be able to create a demand schedule in your mind of how much you'd be willing to pay for a pair of shoes. So if we start at $10 and work our way up all the way to $250, you would know exactly on which ones you would be willing to buy at different prices when it comes to that. This is known as a demand schedule, where the data is an individual of a good for one person. Now, if we did a survey and put all those numbers together for the entire class, this would be known as a market demand schedule. And this is what is important information, especially for a business, to know what is the maximum people would be willing to pay before they go into a substitute effect. So a market demand schedule is taking all the information from a certain demographic or a certain community and putting it into one chart. Once those charts are put together, those schedules are put together, then you can create a demand curve. Now, a demand curve, if we took the amount that you'd be willing to pay for pairs of shoes, we could put that into a curve. And there's two important parts for this. The vertical axis will focus on the price, and the horizontal axis will focus on the quantities. And this graph will be able to tell us at every single price how much you'd be willing to pay or how many you'd be willing to pay on your graph. So it's taking those numbers from your demand schedule, transferring into a demand curve. And reading demand curve, you're focusing on the price and the quantity and seeing where the relationship comes together. If we were to survey you for those shoes, this would be taken into effect at this very moment. So maybe at this very moment you would say this is the maximum you pay for a pair of shoes. But if we asked you by the end of the day or 2 months from now, your status may have changed or your thinking may have changed on those pair of shoes, and now the demand curve would have to change. So whenever we do this, we are saying at that very moment, that constant moment, everything is the same. What would you be willing to buy? So price decreases, the quantity will increase. So that is how we would read a demand curve. That is the end of section 1 of chapter 4. If there's any questions, please let me know.